If you're in the market for a pair of B&W 805 D4s, then this video is for you. I've scoured the net, travelled the seas and searched distant lands to find every review I can on these speakers. Yeah, I didn't write that. So what's the point of this video? The whole point of this video is to save you a bit of time. I've done a lot of research on the 805 D4s recently. I've looked up all the video reviews and I've looked at the written reviews, and I'm just basically trying to piece together this information and figure out what this speaker is all about. If you want to save time, sit back, relax, have yourself a drink. And by the way, if I've missed any information in this video that you think is vital, please feel free to share it down below and let everyone else know what you know, because that's a good thing to do. Anyway, first video review, Andrew Robinson's review. He's recently reviewed the B&W 805 D4s. So let's talk about it. Mid-range, he's saying that it's a largely neutral mid-range and he is impressed by it. Word for word, he says, as for the mids, for me it doesn't get any better. I love the way not only vocals but also how instruments like acoustic guitars and other string instruments are rendered pristine, effortless. Everything in the mid-range has more true-to-life presence, according to Andrew Robinson. He describes the center imaging as superb. He goes on to say he finds it difficult to pinpoint the location of the speakers in a three-dimensional space. Basically, he's saying that the B&Ws recreates all the soundstage possible in the recording, and it does so at the highest level, as you'd expect from speakers that are over $7,000 as well. Andrew noticed that you need to turn these speakers up quite a lot to reveal their potential, and that suggests to me that you're going to need some big boy amplification with these. He also says he wasn't a fan of the grills, but that's a design preference, I guess. He does advocate having one or two subwoofers with this, but for everyday listening, these should be fine on their own. Against the Wharfedale Elysian and the Mission 770s, he says that he prefers the B&W's more precise sound. He says that the Mission 770 sound fuller and warmer tonally compared to the 805s, but he prefers the more precise sound, exactly is what he said. Let's move on to Steve Guttenberg. Now, Steve Guttenberg, he likes these speakers. He describes them as being airy and relaxed. As for the bass, he likes the bass. He describes the bass as being clear, tight and fast. He also recommends home theatre fanatics should add a subwoofer to get most out of these speakers. He sums it up by saying it's a B&W speaker, except it sounds better, lower in distortion, clearer and more transparent, vivid even. Now when he says it's a B&W speaker except it sounds better, it's suggesting to me that these are the typical B&W sound profile. B&Ws are known typically as being a little bit bright, give a bit of sweetness to the sound, and he does describe them as being vivid even, so I'm guessing that they're not going to be 100% neutral. Andrew Robinson, on the other hand, did describe these speakers as neutral, so there's a kind of discrepancy there. Guess people have different ears and different rooms. So let's move on to Shane Lee. Shane Lee has described these speakers as smooth, not bright or harsh whatsoever. He says it doesn't sound like a typical B&W speaker to me, as they typically lean bright. So again, that's like a huge discrepancy there. He's saying it does not sound like a typical B&W speaker. Steve Guttenberg says it does sound like a B&W speaker. Anyway, he recommends that you pair these with a rail subwoofer like the T9, I guess the T9X, to get a nearly true full range audio experience. Now my opinion is if you're shelling out over $7,000 or whatever it is on these speakers, then I would say that these speakers probably deserve a little bit better than Rail's entry level T9, which to be honest, when I reviewed them, I wasn't really overly impressed with those anyway, either T9i and the T9X. Let's move on to Soundstage Network. Now interestingly, Doug Schneider from Soundstage Network was the only person to mention an issue with the treble. He states, "There is no doubt that the treble region, which is primarily the responsibility of the tweeter, is elevated, and that it is not only reflected in the listening, but also in the measurements that we took." So they're taking some measurements and you can clearly see that the treble is exaggerated. Now, if you're an audiophile and you want the music to sound as it should, then this might be a problem for you. Maybe it's not. Maybe your room has got a lot of like absorptive materials and you need some of that treble back. I'm not sure. Now, Doug Schneider also goes on to say that this could be a problem if the music that you typically listen to is already quite treble heavy, and if you listen at high volumes. He says that the louder you played the music, the more the details were elevated, as you'd expect. We're also quite sensitive to those frequencies. They can be quite piercing to our ear, so maybe not a sort of speaker that you'd like to listen to for multiple hours at a time. As for the mid-range, Doug Schneider describes the mid-range as very natural, transparent and quite neutral. With the bass, he says the bass is pretty deep, powerful and controlled, given that this is a two-way stand-mounted design. That said, he thinks there are many other speakers that offer a warmer and fuller bass at this price point, so let's consider that. Moving on to the written reviews, so we got What Hi-Fi. What Hi-Fi have given these speakers 5 stars. Class-leading clarity and resolution and build quality. They also agree with Andrew Robinson, and they say that these speakers don't shine at low volume levels. They also say there is plenty of competition at the price point, and we'll talk about that later. L&B Tech Reviews argues that the 805s are much better than their predecessors, and the sharp price increase, which is about 30%, is justified. That said, even though they say that the price increase is justified, the adjective that they use to sum up the speaker is nice. Hey man, those are some slick speakers you got there. How much did they set you back? Ah yes, B&W 805s. About 10 grand? 10 G's. Jeez man, you could go on a world cruise for that money. They must sound amazing though, right? They sound nice. Now let's move on to the absolute sound and what they had to say about this product. Now I find this interesting. Most other reviewers up until this point haven't had many great things to say about the B&W's bass. However, Absolute Sound says that the 805 has bass to kill for, quote, and this is one of the product's greatest strengths. So it's a bit strange to me because everyone else says that there is a distinct lack of bass. I'm not getting kind of like big vibes about the bass of the B&W 805s from the other reviewers, yet the Absolute Sound are saying the complete opposite. They're saying that the 805s are not just great for audiophiles, but also great for home theatre fanatics too. It's what they said. And that is the complete opposite of what Steve Guttenberg said. He said, if you're a home theatre fanatic, then you definitely need to go out and get some subwoofers for these. Home theatre review. Let's have a look at what they said. They say that you should pair it with a subwoofer, and then there is only so much you can ask for a 6.5-inch driver. Let's look at 7 review. So yet another review giving these speakers full marks, describing it as accurate, spacious and powerful. 7 review says a lot about the B&W Soundstage, saying that the cabinet simply vanishes. This creates the illusion of a sound field rather than a stereo image. They also agree that you should run them at higher volumes rather than lower volumes. And at lower volumes, 7 Review thinks that these sound much thinner and more shut in. 7 Review did not like the appearance of the 805s, but I guess, what do you think? I quite like them, but maybe I don't think they look 10 grand or whatever it is, 7 to 10 grand, God knows how much they cost. Forums. Unfortunately, there wasn't really much information in the forums as the speakers are relatively new. So if you guys have any more information, your personal experiences, please share it down below. And yeah, put it in the comments. Now, what are my thoughts based on the evidence? Should you shortlist the B&Ws, or perhaps should you look at something else? Now, first of all, there are 2 features from everything I've read and watched everyone seems to agree on, and that's this. Number 1 is the soundstage. So if you get these speakers, judging by everything I've read, these are going to be very good at that trick. They're going to sound invisible. In a decent room, of course. Number 2 is the mid-range. Now, the mid-range is probably the most important part out of the audio frequency spectrum, and we're also most sensitive to those regions. And I haven't seen anybody say anything bad about the B&W 805's mid-range, and actually good stuff up until this point. There are 2 inconsistencies about these speakers that are making me doubt their abilities. First of all, it's the treble, the upper registers. Some find it too forward, too bright, others like it. Andrew Robinson, I know from watching his past content that he does like elevated trebles, so perhaps that's why he got on with these speakers. Now the second thing is the bass. Now it's a very difficult thing to review bass and to get it right, because a lot of it comes down to your room and a lot of it comes down to how you place the speakers. Everyone places it differently, so you can't really review this unless you take measurements. That's kind of the only way I could say that you could accurately review bass. However, if the bass is indeed a little bit lean, like a lot of people are saying, then if your room has, let's say, a hump between 50 and 60 hertz or something like that, my room back in the UK has like a bass hump around 50, 60 hertz, then speakers with a slight dip in this very region might make more sense. So it's really up to your room. The only thing I can recommend to you is to add these to your shortlist, but to try the following speakers as alternatives. And again, if I've missed anything, if anybody knows any other competitors to these B&W 805s, then please put it in the comments. So how are the B&Ws against the competition? So number one, Shane Lee has compared the 805s to Peliston bookshelf speakers. He describes the 805s as being more intimate and more enclosed, apparently. He thinks the Pelistons sound more resonant in the mid-range. So number two is the Focal Cantor 1s. Both Shane Lee and Andrew Robinson have compared the 805s to the Focal Cantor 1s. Both agreed that the B&Ws sound better, but also look better, which is their opinion. Monitor Audio Platinum 100s. Now, nobody I've read or heard, whatever, has compared the B&Ws to the Monitor Audios. As for what I've heard, they're great speakers. I really like Monitor Audio speakers. Clean, yet not completely clinical sort of sound. And generally, from my experience, I find them to be a little bit more neutral than B&Ws. Dali Epicon 2s. From what I've heard from Dali, typically they offer a warmer, richer sound, more of a laid-back sort of sound that you can listen to for longer periods of time. Now, I've owned some Dalis in the past, and I've got nothing but great things to say about them, but I've never owned Epicon 2s. So perhaps add it to your shortlist. Tell us what you think. KEF Reference 1 Metas. So it's the new Reference 1 with the Meta technology. Now with these, I'm leaning, these are probably going to be more to my tastes because there's a dedicated bass unit. It's a three-way design. They're ultra low distortion if you look at the measurements, if you look at what people are saying online. And this might solve your bass problems that the B&W 805 seem to have. The other benefit that they have is the coaxial design, which, like I said, has a lot of sonic benefits with regards to phase. You can sit in more positions and stuff like that. So, yeah, my gut feeling is that you should try the KEF Reference 1s. Now, number 6, Focal Sopra 1s. I believe Amir from Audio Science Review, because he takes a lot of measurements from speakers, he really actually rates the high-end Focal speakers, so perhaps another thing to add to your shortlist. And this is the kind of dark horse here, the Yamaha NS3000 and the Yamaha NS5000. Now I know these speakers, even though I've not heard them, I'm reviewing these in my mind right now, but I know that these speakers are going to be good. They just don't get much attention on the Western Hemisphere because Yamaha marketing is just not really the best. They just do too many products, Yamaha. But I really think that these speakers are going to be good. So if you can demo them, I would try and get your hands on them. Dynaudio Confidence. Not heard much about these speakers, but as a brand, I know that they appeal to many. A lot of people like their sound profile, and it's in the same price range, so why not? Number 10 is the Wharfedale Elysian. Now they're a lot bigger, three-way stand mount design, but if you are after a pair of stand mounters and you actually want, you know, you'd rather a bigger, fuller sound, then I'm guessing the Wharfedale Elysian is going to be a good thing to add to your shortlist. And this is my final recommendation for your shortlist, is if you want something a bit smaller, the Fine Audio F1 8. Now, some of you might be wondering, who is Fine Audio? It's the same guys behind Tannoy. They split up a few years back. And if you want an alternative to KEF, remember I mentioned the KEF reference 1 metas earlier. A lot of people say KEFs sound a little bit clinical. That's not always to people's taste. So maybe something like the Fine Audio F1 might be something that, if you like coaxials, but something a little bit more kind of laid back, then maybe the Fine Audios could be something to try. So yeah, that's it. That's all I've got to say. I'll see you in the next video.